Okay, so my backstory was that I was a Chinese immigrant to the United States, and and growing up, I had a fair amount of experience with alienation and certain degree of disenfranchisement, and uh, and I learned to fight through that as part of our journey that we talked about, our personal journey, but also I was. I learned to ask these deep questions first through religion, through growing up in the church, and then through studying philosophy in university, which was that and biochemistry were my majors, and both of those were about rigorously asking, what do we believe and why do we believe those things? And so getting to the core nature of a problem, essentially, what they say, a problem well posed is a problem half solved, essentially. Um, so there was an intellectual background that came into this that will um, that will come up in one of these other questions, and so this was through that through science, one can aspire to address systemic problems, in public health, say, right, and so I wanted to do something like that, but then, one thing that I started seeing, especially working in impoverished communities, underserved communities, is that this was actually an aspect. This was a requirement of my philosophy major. I worked for a year in a very troubled school in the hood in Boston, and a lot of suffering, a lot of human suffering comes not partly, yes, because of economic reasons, but partly for internal or what you might say are spiritual reasons, right? About reasons of empowerment, about reasons of being dehumanized by what is essentially a flawed system. Yeah, and so I started thinking some years ago about this and how, and then went on a pursuit to that wasn't it wasn't completely guided. I had no roadmap to get to where I am now. I never would have expected to have been in Vietnam, but yes, I found out about this El Sistema thing, where, say, in Venezuela, which is one of the world's most screwed up countries, and but yet there they had this thing. Then the guy won the founder won the TED Prize in 2009. I saw his speech about how he was using music to give these children who are coming from favelas in Venezuela, the gift of music. And when someone plays music, all of a sudden they have this, in a more sterile sense, you could say they have a cultural currency, but in another sense, you could say that you're giving them something to belong, right? When you're disenfranchised, when you're dehumanized, you don't belong, and that's one of the tragedies of poverty, but also of a number of other forms of suffering. And so I was moved to tears by his speech, and I wanted to get to Venezuela, and but I didn't want to just land on the plane and be like, "Hey guys, here I am." And so I decided, I'm young, I don't have that much money, not much money to blow, but what could I do? I could save up some money for a bicycle tour that would fulfill a few goals. One, I wanted a kick-ass adventure. Two, I wanted to have an authentic and genuine experience. And three, I wanted to learn Spanish, gain some more cultural knowledge. And so when I got there, I would have more context to relate in an authentic and genuine way. That has been a motivating factor for me for everything, my personal exploration of the world. So even in university, about asking these questions, what is really going on in my world and the world around me and my inner world as well. And so that would be a whole other, that could be hours, but we'll say that, I did have a transformative experience. I was exposed to things that I never even imagined. Even one of the things about coming back from Latin America, I realized we treat each other like shit in the United States. Even among your friends, we're not, we could be so much more kind and affectionate and open and caring without it being, without vulnerability being a sign of weakness, say, Anyhow, so that gave me this bug for travel anyway. So I came back to the U.S. and I started working in for this biotech startup, along with a bunch of other stuff to create a flexibility in my life that allowed me to pursue music still while I was in the U.S. And after over a year, that I got a little bit burnt out of it, and left that biotech. It wasn't giving me I wasn't growing in the way that I wanted to grow with it, and I'm kind of an egoist that way. I wanted to. I don't want other people telling me how my life should go. So I decided that I would go back on the road, and I came to. Well, first I went to China and then came to Vietnam, intending fully to just Vietnam to be another stop on the way. But I spent a week in Vietnam, a month in Vietnam, riding a motorcycle up and down the spine of this country, and really was drawn in so much by the history of struggle here, which I really admired. The history of overcoming struggle and immense adversity of a sort that I had no mental tools to grapple with at all. And when an opportunity came up for me to play music in Central Vietnam and make enough to do that for a bit, so I came back to Vietnam. I started working with some kids in that community, and realized that this was what I wanted in so many ways. That this was something that I could build on, that could become, that was a passion, but it was a passion that I could turn into a cause and a mission and a career. Right? And so as I stayed longer in Vietnam, I learned more and more about Vietnam and saw that more and more that Vietnam was actually a perfect place to do this sort of thing, educational entrepreneurship. It's a developing country. It's one of the fastest growing countries in the world and one of the most populous. So the systemic factors are perfect for this sort of education. The need is immense for it. So there's already incredibly fertile grounds to do this sort of thing, right? And the need is immense for quality education, particularly in arts and creative thinking, critical thinking. That's in shambles in a lot of ways here. And so over time, at first it was like, oh, maybe I'll give this a shot. At this point, it's like, this has to be this. I have to do this. If I have to give this. I have to give myself to this and just see what happens, because this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've been looking for, and in Vietnam, it's been good for me personally. It's been endlessly fascinating and frustrating and exciting and sometimes a little bit scarring too. It's been an adventure unto itself, learning to live and work here, learning about the culture here. And for a lot of reasons, cultural, economic, and macroscopic reasons, Vietnam is a really good place to do what I want to do. It's just to have an impact on a large scale that can actually change the world. Vietnam is a great place to do it. And so when I started, it was just, the first challenge was how to even relate to people. I didn't speak Vietnamese, and this was central Vietnam, where a lot of the people had never even gone more than, 50 kilometers from their homes. So the first way I did it was I just walked around with, and John Lennon used to do this too. He walked around with 2 ukuleles and just asked, like, do you play ukulele? Oh, do you want to? And a lot of people were very, they were very smiley and nice, and then like, oh, okay, that's enough, thank you. And then finally there's this one family that I actually stopped to help the father do some of the work that he was doing at the time, which was moving scrap metal. He operated a scrap metal heap collection. And so they began to trust me and like me based on that, and allowed me to hang out with their kids, and the neighborhood kids, I would hang out with them. And slowly I started teaching the kids to play, and more kids would come, and sometimes even the parents in the community would like come and hang out in this scrap metal yard that we were just holding these classes in. So I came back to Hanoi, raised a bit of money, got some instruments, and went back and started working more. We found a local teacher to work with the kids as well, and And it grew from there. I would come to Hanoi and bring back professional musicians to work with these kids, to show them that there's something. Well, A, so that they could communicate with the kids better than I could, and B, to show them that there's this whole world out there that music can open these doors for you. You know, and that plays into this whole educational model that I wanted to create, because this is something that I thought about a lot, and it's something that I worked in the U.S. as well. That, you know, about music, my own education was that I played in school bands, was technically proficient, and had, you know, some advantages that way, but I had no idea what music could mean for me in the world, right? And the purpose of an education should be to allow you to engage uh, in deeper and more responsible, more conscious ways with the world around you. You know, Martin Luther King said that the purpose of an education should be intelligence plus character. And ultimately, you know, music is about creating harmony in both the literal and the metaphorical sense, for a band to function well together, for an orchestra to function well together. There's a huge degree of cooperation, and even if everybody's like 98% correct, it'll still not sound that good. Right? There's a huge degree of collaboration and cooperation that's necessary for this, but there's also a great deal of intellectual processing as well. And this sort of thinking is immensely valuable in a lot of ways. And maybe that's just me that thinks about it this way. I know plenty of musicians that, you know, that process music in different ways, and that's, I mean, that's cool. That's really cool when I meet those people and we have like talk about how we process what's going on. You know, but at its core, music is for me a tool to open up doors onto the world. It's given me aspirations that I never knew I had. I played with African musicians back in the States. Now I have deep aspirations to go to West Africa. And I know that if I went, I would also have some contacts and a way in too. And also, I have this deep fascination with what's going on there because of what I saw, how people relate to music there. That's part of the culture. That's part of that. The musicians are standard bearers and flag bearers of the culture and the history, as opposed to just, you know, bubblegum entertainment that we have in the States, and in the mass media entertainment music industry. As far as how I teach the kids, is that, you know, everything is about empowerment. So the first thing that we learn with any kid, or even teenagers or adults I work with, is not here's a scale, here's the theory. The first thing I would learn is here's a chord that's really easy, and here's a song that you can sing and perform with just one chord. And now after a few minutes, you have something that you can like show off to your friends, show off to your family, be proud of, something that you can be proud of. And all of a sudden, your experience of the world has changed. In that moment, you have a new power that you never knew you had, but it was actually fairly trivial. You put one finger here and you kind of whack your hand in the general direction of the guitar with the ukulele, and now you're on your way, right? You've taken the first step on that journey, and you can already see results, right? And even the instruments that I've chosen, ukulele, guitar, cajon, these are ukulele in particular. People think it's a toy, but it's a full-on instrument. But it's also the instrument with the lowest barrier to entry. You can start playing songs with one finger or two fingers, and that's it. And you are empowered, and you gain this new skill and ability. Whereas even for a guitar, it takes a little bit more manual coordination. It's more difficult to start playing your first song. And a cajon, for example, is just a box. And the cajon actually started off as an instrument by slaves who needed to hide their instruments from their masters. So it was just, they cut a hole in the box and used that as a drum, but they called it just the box. Cajon is just box in Spanish. And yet, with the cajon, such a simple instrument, there's a broad variety of sounds, and you can learn all the fundamental skills you need to play drums, play a drum set, move on to other things. I was about to say greater, not necessarily greater, just other things. You gain skills that are transferable skills. Same with ukulele, you gain transferable and skills that empower you while you're getting those at the same time. You know, and so that's essentially the crux of the model, is that it's about empowerment. It's not about, the education is not about you memorizing something and then repeating it back and getting a pat on the head. A lot of education is built around gaining the approval of adults, and kids are always starving for adult approval. So they're into that, right? But it's not the thing that inspires the greatest learning, or in the future, say when you're not working with them, what inspires the greatest continued advancement, greatest continued retention, even all these things that are, the wonky way to say that that they love it, right? To inspire, right? To inspire rather than to coerce someone into learning something. And so that's ultimately what it's based around, inspiration and empowerment. And along the way, you happen to learn all these other really useful things too. Cooperation, collaboration, dedication, critical thinking, all that other stuff will come. It comes with it, but the whole time you're being inspired, you're being empowered. The initial funding for the schools came from my own travel budget. Actually, I cut off a trip that I was going to go for much longer because I thought that there was something better, and there was something that I needed to do here. And along the way, I've also raised some money from my personal networks, because I'm very on social media. I'm very open and even vulnerable in a lot of ways about these things. And so, even though a lot of the people that I have in my life I hadn't seen for some time, they still felt like they knew me, and they still felt like they could trust me with this. At any rate, that's the thing. There's a cachet of trust that I had. And so in the future, we'll need to raise more from grants, from philanthropists, potentially even from investors, because for a sustainable model, we're right now looking at, and in the first stages of setting up a social enterprise, we're actually generating revenue, but in a way that it's accessible to everyone, or as much of everyone as we can. Whereas right now, music creative education is only available to an upper crust here in Vietnam, where average monthly wages for a working class person is maybe $150. Paying $20 for an hour of music lessons, which is the market rate, is just not feasible for it to keep doing. Right? And so we want to create a social enterprise that's able to empower people at a price point that it's completely reasonable for them to do, and for them to study. So that's one model of the sustainability. There are other types of things we do, events. We've done some events that have been really good in terms of just raising funds, but also building our image and recognition and reputation and such. So there are things other than cash that one needs to do anything in the world. Really, it's never just about money. So a little bit more about the educational model. Anyway, I'm really influenced by a mixture of the old and the new. There's a lot. There's this revolution in education that's going on with online learning, customized learning, that could say that a program can actually give you more granular, detailed, and attentive feedback than a teacher can, who has to deal with 29 other students, and their feet hurt from standing and their voice is hoarse, and the school isn't paying them enough, and all these other things. There's a revolution in online learning and using technology to enhance learning. But there are also a lot of things about the progressive education that you read, like John Dewey, who is writing at the turn of the 20th century, or you read, say, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is writing during the Enlightenment, and these are ideas that people are still bandying about as if they're new and revolutionary, but they're really not. The implementation is the innovation here, right? How we can incorporate experiential learning, how we can incorporate a model of learning that can meet the demands of society while at the same time meeting the demands of our own humanity. That's hard to do. but it's not as hard as people think think it is. I believe fully that it is possible. We live in a world where this is well within the realm of possibility, and so long as you're brave enough to dream it, it's within our realm of possibility. And this isn't even some hocus pocus, whatever we believe we can achieve kind of nonsense. But this is actually like after thorough analysis of the resources available, this is something that can and should be done. And it's as far as right. So, advice you have for people to develop similar projects. One is to educate yourself about just the minutia of this stuff. Like it's mind-numbing, but also it's necessary. Things like accounting, how accounting works, basic accounting. That will save you. That will save you a lot of money if you don't have to pay someone else to do the kind of stuff that you could just do by yourself, right? Learn how the business model works. Learn how to write a business model. How to think about the different factors that affect your business. There's a lot of resources online to educate yourself about this. If you're lucky enough to live in a city with a well-developed ecosystem about it, there are always tons of free events. Like I was in the startup scene in Boston, and there were so many free events with so much free expertise. I spent time in one of the top law firms in Boston, like one of the big five law firms in Boston, founded by a former Supreme Court justice, and they would have free events where you could just go and talk. So this law firm, they would have Nutter, McClellan, and Fish, it was called, one of the big five, founded by a former Supreme Court justice. You can go in and talk with them. Their big clients, billionaires, and professors and experts in all their various fields, and they would have these free events where you could go and they just take you through all of this stuff. Almost every major city has those resources. Just look for them. If not, then go online and educate yourself about the daily process of what you need, and find other people who are doing something similar and what they've done, what they've gone through, what they've had to learn. That's always out there. Nothing is completely original, and originality doesn't even matter as much as authenticity. Right? Nothing's original. I had a professor, multiple Guggenheim Award winner, who would just tell us all the time, amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Right? It's totally fine to get inspiration from other people, and it will send you faster along your path as well. Learn from the mistakes of others so you don't have to make those same ones. Yeah, let other people take the fall for you, if you want to put it in a cynical way. And another one, especially for something in a developing country like this, is learn about the culture. One of the biggest hurdles for me was about how to work in Vietnam. It's a different culture. It's the styles of working. There are certain pitfalls that are different here. A verbal promise is not worth as much here as it is in the States. There are different indicators, there are different reads that you have to make. Even if you think you're pretty good at relating with people from back home, if you're working in a culture that's not your own, take time to learn that. Take time to learn the local culture, learn the local language. Even the fact that I speak a limited amount of Vietnamese is immediately endearing and immediately opens up a lot of doors to building bridges. And that's the most important thing. Build bridges, right? One is to prepare yourself well using the immense wealth of free information and guidance that's out there, and another is to build your own bridges, because if you wait for other people to build your bridges for you, it might work, but why leave that to chance? And so we're on our way, and so now I'm going to try to build another bridge, and just ask for help. Another thing is ask for help. A lot of people are really, really happy to help if you just ask for help, and it's not embarrassing. It's not you won't look weak if you ask good questions. It's just ask for help, ask for advice, get information, build bridges in as many ways as possible. And so, like, for us, for example, right now I'm looking for, well, one of course is donations for more instruments to expand our services. We're talking with new partners that as I've learned in Vietnam, we have to be have more of a process to vet people and such. But we are hoping to expand to build more, to reach more kids, and so we'll need more instruments. We'll need some staff. We'll need to pay teachers as well, and so donations help with that. But on top of that, in Vietnam, getting to know more people. So connections and introductions to people who are passionate about education, passionate about moving Vietnam forward, who are invested and doing good work. Those people, I want to know those people, and you and I have both talked about that more of those connections should and need to be made, and as well, there's some work that we're doing that we could really use some designers for, actually, graphic design, video editing, like visual arts. If there are any artists that are willing to do some pro bono work, that would be terrific. And of course, yeah, just donations online can be made either a website that goes directly to me via there's a 4% surcharge on that, or it can be made through a tax deductible. We are a registered charity in the United States, so there's 501c3 donations as well that can be made through Fractured Atlas, our sponsoring organization, so that we can raise money from. So through them, we can raise money from all 50 states in the United States, and you'd be able to get a tax rebate as well, and and as well, within Vietnam, you can make a donation through Blue Dragons, whom we work with as well. So there are a few ways. There are a few ways to contribute in not in terms of money donations, but also in terms of helping build our program, actually. So yeah, hope that really hope that this interview was helpful, and that some hopefully some people will be inspired, and maybe we'll make some new friends and get some more people involved in our movement.